ask you a question. Look at the structure of sulfonylalanine. And my question to you is, what's an amino acid that looks very similar to that that's one of our primary 20? Well, if you look at the structure of this, okay, we still have our alpha carboxyl group, we have our alpha amine, we have our alpha carbon that's right here in my mouse list, and we have a beta carbon, and then what if I have this? Right? What if I have this? Well, structurally, this is aspartate, right? And structurally, aspartate looks very similar to sulfonylalanine. Now, of course, this carbon atom right here, of course, this carbon atom is a lot smaller than the sulfur atom, right? But they do look very similar, okay? If you were to look at the rest of the molecule, right, it's just alanine, right? Just like it's alanine here, right? This group right here, this is just an alanyl group. And so then you just have this negative charge that's attached to that alanyl group. In the case of sulfonylalanine, it's a sulfonyl group. In the case of aspartate, it's a carboxyl group. So structurally, they're very similar to each other, and that's why sulfonylalanine transaminase is the same enzyme as aspartate transaminase. They're one and the same. In other words, another way of saying this is that sulfonylalanine reacts with aspartate transaminase. Okay? And remember that aspartate transaminase is both a mitochondrial and a cytosolic enzyme. Keep that in mind. Okay? So sulfonylalanine reacts with aspartate transaminase, you get sulfonylpyruvate. Sulfonylpyruvate undergoes a spontaneous hydrolysis, and that bond that line that's in purple represents the bond that's being cleaved. And we get pyruvate and sulfite. Pyruvate goes into gluconeogenesis, assuming that you're a liver hepatocyte, and the glucose gets dumped into the blood and feeds peripheral tissues. The sulfite gets oxidized by sulfite oxidase from sulfate, which is a less toxic version of a sulfur oxygen-containing compound. So I hope this video gives you a little bit of intuition on cysteine metabolism. See you in the next video. Welcome back. In the last video, I mentioned that there were ways that we could essentially convert L-serine to D-serine. And it's not that we're the only organisms that can do this. In fact, there are lots of other organisms like bacterial cells that can actually do this readily. In fact, they, in large part, convert a lot of their L-amino acids to D-amino acids. Okay? And in general, in humans, when we do this to L-serine to D-serine, this is going to be a pyridoxal phosphate-dependent racemization. Okay? And the enzyme that catalyzes this in humans is called serine racemase. Okay? And if you remember from the last video, I mentioned that the reason it's called a racemase is that effectively you're racemizing your concentration of serine. You're taking a lot of the L-serine and converting some of it into D-serine. So you're not going to actually make a racemic mixture, but I think it gets the point across. You're taking some of your L-isomers and converting them into D-isomers. So what this enzyme is going to do is it's going to take L-serine and it's going to isomerize the alpha carbon. So if we look here, the active site to keep this oxygen, to keep this nitrogen, the pyridine ring, protein, and so forth. But effectively what's going to happen is we're first going to create the linkage between the L-amino acid, in this case serine, and the pyridoxal phosphate. So the alpha amine of the serine is going to start off in the deprotonated state, and it's going to be a nucleophilic attack on this carbon of pyridoxal phosphate. That's going to effectively kick these pi electrons on the glycine. And so you should generate this between serine and pyridoxal phosphate, but you still have pyridoxal phosphate be single the lysine residue in the active site. So not only the pyridoxal phosphate has the lysine down, you have the amino acid movement attached. Okay? And in this one, what's going to happen is you're going to have a beta elimination. Okay? So keep in mind that there's a lone pair on this nitrogen as part of the lysine residue. What's going to attack one of the protons that's on the alpha amine of the serine, and that's going to initiate the beta elimination. Okay? So this is going to be a third process to elimination by molecular and so forth. And what that's going to do is create a proteinated shift-base linkage between serine amino acid and the pyridoxal phosphate. Now, what's important to keep in mind is that the serine at this point, or basically what was the serine, of course, now it's shift-base, but what was the serine has L-stereoisomers. Okay, so this carbon, again, that I'm putting on you in purple, this carbon right here, this is the L-isomer. We haven't changed the stereochemistry of that carbon. Everything's still the same, so it's still the L-isomer. What I really want to do in this video is not have you memorize or learn a mechanism blindly, but to really understand this mechanism. This hopefully should give you a lot of intuition on what's happening, especially with respect to changes in conformation and stereochemistry, how things exist in an active site. Now, bear in mind that this up here, what was serine, of course, now is base, right? That's the L-isomer, right? And so if we were to draw it in the active site, let me do this, okay? Let's say that I have an axis right here that goes straight up, and that's my Z-axis, right? And then let's say I have this axis, this is my x-axis, and then of course come back and going forward, that's of course the y-axis, right? Well, let's say, for instance, that the hydrogen, this alpha hydrogen, keep in mind this is the alpha hydrogen alpha carbon bond. Let's say that represents the z-axis, right? So what we're doing now is we're imagining the plane. Remember, mentioned the XY plane. Well, imagine that the XY plane, imagine that we're looking at it it's straight on, and that plane is like this, right? That's the plane. That's the XY plane. That's this plane right here, okay? And of course, the hydrogen-alpha-carbon bond is going straight up perpendicular. In other words, the XY plane is perpendicular to the hydrogen-carbon bond, okay? Because all the other groups have to exist at approximately 109.5 degrees away from the z-axis, right? Away from the carbon-hydrogen bond, they're all going to be below the XY plane, right? And what I want you to understand is that there's a base to the active site of the theory radiation, okay? And the base is oriented above the XY plane, okay? In other words, if it's on the positive, if this z right here, this is a positive z, then the z vector of the base will be positive above that plane. And that's really important for the catalysis, okay? Because if the base was on the bottom, if it was below the XY plane, this mechanism wouldn't work, okay? So let's actually think about what might happen, okay? So the base of the active site is going to deprotonate the alpha carbon, okay? In other words, this base is going to extract the proton from the alpha carbon. And what's going to happen, and we'll look at it here, is that the bond between the hydrogen and the alpha carbon is going to come and do a double bond rearrangement with the shift base. And we'll actually look at the arrangement on here. So these electrons come in here, and you get a double bond rearrangement in which you destroy this aromatic ring and make a quinone version of it. This is actually called a quinonoid, okay? I mean, you're going to work from oid after word. It's similar to something, but not exactly. So drawn right here. That's this. Okay. Notice that if you were actually to draw that XY plane, all of those bonds, and that's basically these. Let me do those in red. These bonds right here. Okay. All of those are in the plane. Okay. In other words, what you can say is that all of their z vectors would be zero, right? They don't exist in the z anywhere on the z-axis. They're in the XY plane, and in fact, you could make the argument that the angular distance between each of these bonds is approximately 120 degrees, right? So they're all in the plane XY. So now what's happened is, let me do this in red. So these bonds right here, all these ones, these are essentially, they're all in the XY plane. So let's actually make the XY plane here, okay? All of these red bonds, okay? Basically picture those, okay? Picture those all in that XY plane, meaning anything that would be above that plane, right, that would have a positive Z value, and anything below would have a negative Z value. Well, in our first case, right here, right, in our first case, the hydrogen, the alpha hydrogen started out above the XY plane, okay, and actually so did the base that deprotonated that carbon, okay. But during the change in conformation of the enzyme, okay, what ends up happening is the base that originally did the deprotonation now is protonated, but it repositioned itself with respect to the quinonoid ring. Okay, that's actually what this is called. This whole ring right here, this is all called a quinonoid intermediate. Okay, and the reason it's called a quinonoid is because it's similar to a quinone, but it's not quite a quinone, so they add the oid at the end. So it's a quinonoid. But notice how all of this is just a conjugated pi bond system, right? So what does that tell you about its geometry? It's planar. Okay, so all of this business over here, all of this business on this side of the nitrogen shift base is all planar. Okay, so it's all flat. Okay, now what happens during this time is the change in conformation of the enzyme switched the protonated base to below the XY plane. Here, notice the base was above the XY plane, but now it's reoriented itself to below the quinonoid ring. Okay, so what's going to happen is, let's look at the mechanism up here. There's going to be a double bond rearrangement in which we regenerate the aromaticity. Okay, so you get a double bond rearrangement, okay, of the pi bonds. But what's going to happen is this shift base is going to come out and extract the proton from the base. But bear in mind that now the base that's protonated is below the XY plane, right? So effectively what's going to happen is when this pi bond comes out and extracts the proton, you're going to get inversion of stereochemistry. So what will end up happening is you get something like this, okay? So when this pi bond came out and extracted the proton from below the XY plane, you get a situation like this, and you flip the stereochemistry. So let's for 1 minute imagine what would have happened if you didn't have that change in conformation. Let's say that instead of switching to where the protonate base was below the XY plane, let's for instance ask ourselves what would happen if it was above. Well, you would still have that double bond rearrangement to get rid of the quinonoid intermediate, right? But if you went and just protonated or re-extracted the proton from the base, you'd end up with this again, right? And that's not what we want. The whole reason that we have the ability to invert the stereochemistry is because of the change in conformation of the enzyme that facilitates the movement, facilitates the okay, that's the only reason that's allowed to happen. Okay, and what that generates, it generates this. this part of the serine, and this part of the serine now has D isomerism, so it's the D isomer. Okay, we successfully isomerize the alpha carbon. But now what we have to do is we have to get rid of that shift-based linkage, because we don't just want serine attached, or just a D serine attached to pyridoxal phosphate, we want free D serine, right? You don't want it in that linkage. So we have to reattach pyridoxal phosphate to the enzyme, which has the lysine residue. So what's going to happen is the lysine residue is going to do a nucleophilic attack on that pyridoxal phosphate carbon, forcing these pi electrons onto the nitrogen, right? And then that's going to give us this right here. And at this point, we're effectively going to reverse the initial step of the mechanism. So we're basically in this step just going to reverse the first step of the mechanism. Okay? And if you want more elucidation on that, you want proof, go back and look at the first step of the mechanism. You'll find we're just reversing it. Okay? And in fact, we had a structure almost identical to this. Go back and look, and you'll see. Okay? So this amine is going to deprotonate here. We're going to get a proton transfer, and then loss of a leaving group. That's just the steps of the beta elimination, right? And our leaving group is going to be D-serine. Okay? So this molecule right here, this is D-serine, okay? And once again, we regenerate the resting state of our pyridoxal phosphate, which is a shift-based linkage to a lysine residue of the enzyme serine racemase. Welcome back to the amino acid oxidation playlist. In this video, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the catabolic pathway for tryptophan, where it gets converted to something called 2-amino-3-carboxynucleonate 6-semi-aldehyde. What we're going to find is that tryptophan catabolism is very complicated. It's a very lengthy pathway, so we're only going to do part of it here. And again, that's up to 2-amino-3-carboxynucleonate 6-semi-aldehyde. Now, one thing I want to point your attention to is in tryptophan, notice we have aromaticity, right, in the R group. And my question to you is, what type of aromaticity is it? Well, if you look at this ring, you would tell me that it's an indole ring. And in fact, indole rings are doubly aromatic, right? They're a bicyclic structure, right? And both rings are actually aromatic. And my question to you is also, what is the stability of an aromatic ring? And aromatic rings, especially doubly aromatic rings, are extraordinarily stable. They're very low in energy, okay? Which also tends to make them very unreactive. And part of the problem in catabolizing such an amino acid with such a stable R group is that it's so stable, right? You're going to have to really work to open up the ring, and you're going to have to provide something that's really high in energy to open it up. And I want you to think back to your organic chemistry, organic 1 and 2. And my question to you is, which aromatic ring did you tend to work with? And you worked with benzene, right? And if you wanted to get benzene to react, well, you had to provide special high energy conditions in which you had exceptional electrophiles, especially if you want to do an electrophilic aromatic substitution. But here's another question. Did you ever see a reaction in organic 1 or 2 where you actually completely destroyed the benzene ring? And the answer is no. You may have lost aromaticity for a brief moment when you generated a sigma complex or a mesohyper complex, right? But you quickly regained aromaticity because aromaticity is a stabilizing effect, right? Well, you never saw a reaction where you destroyed an aromatic ring completely, but the interesting thing about this pathway, much like phenylalanine and tyrosine catabolism, is that we're actually going to completely destroy the aromatic ring. But because it's so stable, being a doubly aromatic ring, we're going to have to do it in several steps. There's not just going to be 1 or 2 enzymes that destroys the whole indole ring. We're actually going to have to do it sequentially. We're going to first destroy the 5-member part of the ring, and then in 2 completely different steps, we're going to destroy the 6-member ring. Okay? And what I want to first mention is that when we destroy such a stable ring, we're going to have to provide very high energy conditions. And the high energy conditions that we're going to have to use is molecular oxygen. You need to familiarize yourself with oxygen as being one of the most high energy reactive species in all of biochemistry 1 and 2. And even if you go beyond those classes and you start getting into steroid biosynthesis and wild salt synthesis, it's still going to retain its high energy reactive character. Okay, so without boring you any further with stability and aromaticity, let's actually get into the pathway. Okay, the committed and rate limiting step in tryptophan catabolism is going to be catalyzed by tryptophan 2,3-dioxygenase. Now, what's important to mention about these pathways is the rate limiting and committed steps tend to be catalyzed by mitochondrial enzymes. Okay, and I've asked this question before in other videos, but I'll ask it again just to get you in the habit of thinking about it. And the question is this: why is it that these committed steps of amino acid catabolism, why is it that they exist in the mitochondrial matrix? And another follow-up question sort of leads you into the answer is, what's a process that involves amino acids that occurs in the cytosol? And the answer is ribosomal translation, right? The process of activating amino acids using tRNA synthetases, and then the process of translating the mRNA into a protein. And so part of the beauty of how the cell works is you biochemically and really structurally compartmentalize the area in which you do amino acid catabolism from the area in which you do protein biosynthesis. And I think that makes sense. You don't want to have the area where you destroy amino acids in the same place where you're actually putting them together into a protein. So most of the committed steps in these catabolic pathways occur in the mitochondria, and pretty much all the other enzymes do as well. And specifically, this enzyme tryptophan 2,3-dioxygenase is expressed at very high concentrations in the liver hepatocytes. Okay, so it's going to incorporate both atoms of molecular oxygen into the tryptophan, and it's going to destroy the 5-member ring. And specifically, the bond that we're going to destroy is this one that I'll show in blue. This is the bond that we're going to destroy right here. And what we're going to get in the process is something called informal kynurenine. Now, tryptophan has several fates in the cell, and We can go into that in another video. But one of the things that tryptophan can enter into is serotonin biosynthesis. And serotonin, as you might be aware of, is one of the most important neurotransmitters in your body. It's certainly responsible for good mood, sleep regulation, and in the context of blood clotting and coagulation, it's a vasoconstrictor in the blood vessel system, right? But once you use this enzyme and you catabolize tryptophan into N-formyl kynurenine, the N-formyl kynurenine is now completely committed into tryptophan catabolism. So by using this enzyme, you absolutely ensure that tryptophan gets catabolized. Once you generate N-formyl kynurenine, this is the point of no return for tryptophan catabolism. Now, N-formyl kynurenine, which is now committed into the catabolic pathway, is going to react with a hydrolytic enzyme. And the hydrolytic enzyme specifically is going to target this carbon that I'm highlighting in orange, okay? And effectively, that's the carbon where the nucleophilic acyl substitution will occur. And the reason this is called N-formyl kynurenine is because this group right here, that I'm highlighting in yellow, that's the formyl group. And so you can imagine that the rest of this molecule, which is up here, this part of the molecule is kynurenine, and it is. So that's the reason that this molecule is called N-formyl kynurenine. And N-formyl kynurenine formamidase is going to hydrolyze off that formyl group, and it's essentially going to leave as formate, and the formate molecule is right here. Now, formate is a toxic molecule, but we have catabolic pathways to deal with that. And in another video, we'll actually look at the catabolic pathway for that. So suffice it to say for now, this formate is going to get catabolized. Okay. And of course, once we hydrolyze off the formate group, or the formyl group, we get kynurenine. And this is the molecule for which the pathway is named. So because the N-formyl kynurenine is committed to this pathway, this is called the kynurenine pathway of tryptophan degradation. Okay. So the very next enzyme that we're going to react kynurenine with is called kynurenine-3 monooxygenase. Now, if we were to look at the structure of molecular oxygen, which looks like this, when we draw molecular oxygen as it exists at physiological pH, molecular oxygen has two atoms of oxygen, right? One of these atoms of oxygen, which we can call this one of these atoms is going to get incorporated into the kynurenine, and that particular oxygen is shown right here as a hydroxyl group. The other atom of oxygen that's part of molecular oxygen gets incorporated into water. And so not only can we call this a monooxygenase, we can also call it a mixed function oxidase or a hydroxylase. So another name for this enzyme that you might often hear is kynurenine-3 hydroxylase. And the reason it's called 3 hydroxylase is because it's going to hydroxylate the 3 position on kynurenine. And so what you should end up getting out of this reaction is 3-hydroxykynurenine. Okay? Now, we have 3-hydroxykynurenine. What I want to point your attention to is this. We have this molecule right here, and I'll do this in yellow. We have this part of kynurenine right here. And if I ask you what group this is, well, you might look at it and not be sure at first, but if you look at this right here, what amino acid is this? Well, this is just L-alanine, right? So you would call this group right here, this is an alanyl group. This is an alanyl group, and specifically what kynurenine is going to do is it's going to target this particular carbon in a nucleophilic acyl substitution reaction, and it's going to hydrolyze off L-alanine. And so what you should be left with is this molecule right here, which is 3-hydroxyanthranilate. Okay? Now, the interesting thing about tryptophan catabolism is that we get 3-hydroxyanthranilate. But if we were to remove that hydroxy group and be left with anthranilate, the anthranilate is used to biosynthesize tryptophan. And that's not done in humans, that's done in bacteria. But it's just interesting to think about. The anthranilate is used to biosynthesize tryptophan, whereas 3-hydroxyanthranilate is a catabolic product of tryptophan catabolism. Okay. Now, before we actually go into the next reaction of 3-hydroxyanthranilate, let's focus on L-alanine for just a second. Now, this process, of course, is occurring in the liver, and what we have to imagine is that the alanine is going to react, the alanine is going to react with alanine transaminase. So this will be alanine transaminase, right? And alanine transaminase is, of course, going to use, like all transaminases, an alpha-ketoglutarate, and it's going to transfer this amine group, right, onto alpha-ketoglutarate, and of course, you're going to get glutamate out of it, right? But in the process, what you're going to generate is you're going to generate pyruvate. And remember, it pains me to say this because I think this is not what happens, but you can effectively think of transaminase reactions as substitutions between amines and carbonyls. And so we know this molecule is pyruvate, okay? And this process is occurring in the liver. Now let's think about the fate of pyruvate that we generate through alanine transaminase. Pyruvate, assuming we're in the fasting state, is going to be shunted into gluconeogenesis by the liver, right? So this process is going to be gluconeogenesis, right? And we should get a molecule of glucose per 2 molecules of pyruvate. Recall that glucose is a 6-carbon molecule, right? And pyruvate is a 3-carbon molecule. So if you think about all the reactions in glycolysis that occurred in the payoff phase, we had to do 2 of each of those reactions per glucose, right? Because aldolase split from those 6-bisphosphate into 2 3-carbon molecules. So up through the creation of dihydroxyethanol phosphate and glyceraldehyde-3-phosphate, we're going to have to do 2 of each reaction. Now, pyruvate will react with pyruvate carboxylase and consume 1 ATP per reaction. But since we're going to have to do it twice to make 1 molecule of glucose, you're essentially going to have to burn 2 ATPs in 2 reactions of pyruvate carboxylase, which should give you oxaloacetate. But then oxaloacetate is going to have to react with PEP carboxykinase to give you phosphoenolpyruvate. Again, you'll have to do this reaction twice, and that's going to burn 2 GTPs. right? And then if we're reversing phosphoglycerate kinase in the gluconeogenic direction, we're going to have to burn 2 ATPs per generation of 1 glucose. So in all, when we convert pyruvate to glucose, assuming we're in the fasting state, we're going to have to burn 6 nucleoside triphosphates. Now this is of course okay by the liver standards, because remember that the liver generates most of its energy through beta oxidation, right? It's constantly burning fats, and so it's going to have a constant supply of NADH through the enzyme beta-hydroxyacetyl-CoA dehydrogenase. It should have a constant supply of butyquinol through fatty acyl-CoA dehydrogenase, and therefore have fuel for the respiratory chain and the pumping of protons. And we know, of course, that pumping of protons powers ATP synthase, and so you should have plenty of ATP floating around the cell, and so this gluconeogenic process should not be a problem for the liver. And of course, the liver is the main organ that's going to do gluconeogenesis. Anyways, let's get back to the tryptophan metabolism now that we've seen the phase of alanine in the fasting state. Okay, so we saw that kynureninase hydrolyzes off the alanyl group to make alanine from 3-hydroxykynurenine to make 3-hydroxyanthranilate. Now, what we've done essentially by hydroxylating the kynurenine ring is we've activated the benzene ring, okay? And we've raised it up in energy. Now it's high enough up in energy to where we can use a dioxygenase to cleave apart the ring completely. Now, one thing I want to point your attention to is we have a dioxygenase here, and we also had one in the first committed step of tryptophan metabolism. And we also have 2 dioxygenases in phenylalanine and tyrosine